What an honor it is to be here with these gentlemen to talk about the war on truth. And we couldn't have more qualified people to address that topic. And Mr. Ambassador, we're going to start with you. You have witnessed history. You have made history. How do you explain the war on truth that we're experiencing right now? How do you explain the fact that truth isn't what it might have once been in American culture?
Well, you know, I really can't figure that out. I was always taught, well, I was never a Boy Scout, but somebody gave me a Boy Scout handbook. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to guard my country, obey the Scout law. I mean, there were all kinds of little things that I learned before, well, I was 6, 7. And, but then I lived in a neighborhood that made me figure out the truth. I had an Irish grocery store on one corner, an Italian bar on the next, the Nazi party was on the third corner, and a Chevrolet dealership around the fourth corner. And I lived, me and my brother were the only black kids in the block. They had black folk in the block. This is right downtown New Orleans. So all of the problems that we've been living with for the last 90 years, I was living with when I was 5 and 6. And so it's, I mean, well, most of my daddy was a dentist, and most of his suppliers happened to be Jewish. So when you come to get to his office, he had to pass a swastika that was about 4 feet by 6 feet, hanging on at the Nazi party headquarters 50 yards from where I was born. So, I mean, I had to figure out what race was, and I had to figure out the differences, and I had to learn to get along. And I also had to learn to fight. And when, well, my daddy said, if you know how to fight, you don't have to fight. And so he took a great deal of effort to take me to the boxing gym, where New Orleans was a great boxing town. So he said, I mean, he had us taking boxing lessons. When he fixed up the fighter's teeth and they couldn't pay, he said, that's all right, just take my sons over there and teach them something. And so it's a life struggle with me. And later on, when I hooked up with Martin Luther King, he used to make us laugh at death. And he'd say, if you're not ready, if you haven't found something you're ready to die for, you're not fit to live. And then he would go into a lesson on death. And the way he would do it was pick out somebody, say like, I know Tip is always trying to run up, be in front on the camera. And so I figure that one of these days, if somebody comes after me, one of you all will jump in front of trying to get on the camera, and you take the bullet for me. But then he'd make you laugh, and he'd say, but then my real trouble starts. He said, I got to figure out how to preach you into heaven. And he would start doing a sermon on your life that would not be the Martin Luther King you know, but more like Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
And he'd think of all of the embarrassing things that he's heard rumors about, and he'd make like he's doing it in church at your funeral and telling the world all of the things that you'd never want said in public. But what the point was, he made you laugh at death. And He said, I don't care how rich you are, I don't care how good looking you are, I don't care how smart you are, you're going to die. That's one thing that we cannot escape. And he said, the only question is, what is it you're willing to give your life for? And that's the question. We found now that there's some people that are willing to give their life just for power and attention. And just to be in the limelight is enough. But then you have real troubles in the world where people have to make really determined decisions and ask the question, is this worth my giving my life for? And you have that in the Ukraine. And it's almost, that's what freedom is all about. The Ukraine citizens made a decision that they wanted to determine their own destiny. I don't think the Russians had a chance to make that decision. They were told by their government that they had to do this. And I think that's the difference between freedom and democracy and totalitarianism.
Amen. But one of the reasons, Mr. Ambassador, that Russia is able to wage this war is they are sending out disinformation to Russians about the nature of that war. We see it, the problem with truth, not only domestically, but internationally. And Anthony, I want to ask you, you have been in politics and in business. How has our inability to agree on truth devolved our government, and what are the impacts on the business community?
Well, I first want to thank Mark for not mentioning the fact that I got fired from the White House after 11 days, so thank you, Mark. Then again, everybody knew that, so, but
you know, I kind of got fired too, but that's a badge of honor.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that from you. Coming from you, that means a lot, Ambassador.
If Ambassador Young got fired, it is a badge of honor, without question.
I don't know if mine was a badge of honor or not, but the truth be told, it was a great learning experience, and it's about, after you have something happen to you like that, you got to bounce and stay in the game. That's a big lesson that Reggie was speaking about and others up here. But I just want to apply some context, if it's okay. In 1930, Henry Luce, who was the founder of Time magazine, went to visit Joe Stalin, and he interviewed Stalin. And Stalin said that he was going to crush the United States. And Mr. Luce said, well, how are you going to do that? He says, well, the KGB were experts in disinformation.
Yeah.
And the United States is a mongrel nation. It's multi-racial, it's multi-religious, and it's this big separated entity. He didn't see it as the idea that Lincoln saw it as, or Dr. King. He says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread disinformation. I'm going to get the people of the United States to hate each other and to get very, very tribal and to not understand their commonality. But what he got wrong about the United States at that time is that we had more or less a unified media, and our grandparents and our great-grandparents who had immigrant stories, or some of us came here through slavery, they actually still loved the country. They loved the idea of the country, what Lincoln said about this being the last best hope for mankind. And so we were able to hang together, excuse me. But today, Mark, because of social media, and because of the fragmentation of the way information is delivered, these very same messengers are doing that to the United States. And whether it's the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, they have all these social media bots that are coming in, and they're spreading lies and they're spreading disinformation, and it's very hard to contain. And I don't know how we correct that other than through a rededication to the civic virtues of America and what we all believe in. We have to start to go back to that as sort of a preventative medicine, because you're never in a free speech society going to be able to contain the lies.
But Anthony, we're also doing it to ourselves.
We are.
Because you have this fragmented media landscape that is not just dominated by bots that may be the doing of foreign governments, but you also have media
question.
outlets that are purveying misinformation and disinformation to engage an audience.
No question.
To incite anger and indignation. And Tip, I want to ask you, what role does social media play in this? What role does social media play in propagating misinformation and disinformation and untruths?
I mean, I think that it pretty much serves as the community in which propaganda is distributed. I think that the lack of facts and people being in such a rush to punish before they actually find, what the true validity of these things are. Everybody, wants to. The power of punishment has overcome so many people. People wanting to be authoritative, people wanting to serve as a disciplinarian. You know what I mean? But I'm a firm believer in you can't cancel what you didn't create. I don't give validation, I don't give authority, I'm not looking for anyone I know where my blessings come from. So can't no human being take from me what was God given.
Let me ask you, how do you define cancel culture, Tip?
That's an amazing question. I think it's ambiguous. It's like, I guess it would be when the masses of society are influenced or feel somewhat pressured to take a stand against someone for something that they heard a bunch of other people said that they said, and you know what I'm saying, or that a bunch of people said that they did, and it really, I like to just go back to the Constitution, you know what I'm saying, because that seems as though it was supposed to serve as a guide for American people to be able to live and operate within and up under. So if you're in doubt, just go back to the Constitution. And due process is a part of everyone's constitutional right. Yes, sir. Please do.
You all need to celebrate. Here's hip hop taking us back to the Constitution. And we can't get the Supreme Court to do that all the time.
Yeah,
thank you, my brother.
Man, thank you. This is my glorious mentor. You know what I mean, Ambassador.
But I didn't teach you that.
No, not what. But you did. Okay. You just don't know it. I think that, man, we just all, if everyone was to, just go with the flow, fall in line. That's what cancel culture creates. The notion for people to do, just go with the flow. Don't speak truth to power. Don't challenge the perspectives of now. There's no evolution in that. You cannot evolve just going with the flow and doing what you're told and doing as others are doing. You have to have individuality. You have to have freedoms to be able to speak truth. And also, I think everybody has a civic duty to research fact before going into a form of punishment, whether it's individually or collectively. But I mean, at the end of the day, whatever happens, God has given us all that we need to get through it. So I don't really concern myself with any of it. But I'm aware of it.
Good for you. Well put, Tip. Anthony, I want to go back to something you alluded to. Anthony has been canceled in his life because of an ill-fated stint at the White House as the White House communications director under Donald Trump. He was in that position for 11 days and for reasons that Anthony might enumerate, was fired from that position and was abruptly canceled by the American public. And you talked about that backstage, Anthony. What was that ordeal like, and how did you get through it?
I mean, it sucked. I mean, it was terrible.
Well, first of all, talk about why you got fired, and then talk about the.
Well, I mean, the public reason I got fired is because of something I said about Steve Bannon, which is probably not appropriate for the stage, but it's really funny. You can look it up on Google. But, and I mean, he was a terrible guy, but we're not here to talk about him. But the real reason I got fired is I was fighting with the president over certain things where he wasn't thinking about the presidency as the institution of the presidency, and it was all a reaction about himself. And when you're in that job, it's not about you, it's about the American people. That house is the American people's home. And so we were in there fighting. We were in the Oval Office. There was one thing he wanted to disclose, which I don't want to get into, and I fought with him over it. And then I brought in a cabinet member, and he didn't like that, and he yelled at me and said that I was on his team and I'm not part of the deep state and all this sort of nonsense. But it was, for me, I was always looking at it, what is in the interests of the American people, not the right-leaning people or the left-leaning people. That's an office that all of us vote on. Okay, in the Senate, you got to vote on it if you're from that state. The House of Representatives, it's your district. But every one of us votes for the president. And so it's like what Truman said about the presidency, you know, I am a lobbyist, but I happen to be a lobbyist for all of the American people, not for these silly special interests that pervade Washington. So that's why I more or less got fired. And it's fine. I took it as well as somebody could take it, but I'll just say this to you. I got fired 3 or 4 days afterwards. I was lit up by every cable pundit. I was parodied on Saturday Night Live. Bill Hader played me. I thought, frankly, I thought he needed more hairspray. I told Lorne Michaels that. And, you know, and I got destroyed by like Stephen Colbert. I mean, I think he had even like a cartoon character of me, you know. And by the way, racial tropes, you know, I was Tony Soprano on the Potomac. You can laugh at that. I actually don't care. I was a Jersey Shore cast member in the White House. I mean, they were coming in every which direction at me. But I went right back at them, okay? And that's what I would tell anybody in this room. I would tell Tip or anybody, when they're coming for you, you got to go right back at them. So I went on Colbert. I did the mean tweets on Jimmy Kimmel. I faced the music in the media. And when I thought the president was off the rails, which was, you know, maybe later than you got there or somebody else may have gotten there, I spoke out about it. Okay, and I said, okay, he is off the rails and he can't be the president anymore. This guy is nuts. Okay, and I talked about it and I defended the position. And I was telling Ambassador Young, my 31-year-old son is like, Dad, you're just killing my networking opportunities because, you know, the Republicans hate you because you were with Trump. The Democrats hate you because you left Trump. How am I going to network, Dad? How am I going to network? But the truth is, maybe I'm getting closer to the truth, right? And what I would say to you is, if they're hitting you, you got to respond. You can't sit there. My friend Billy Bush, who you may or may not remember, he was on the bus with Trump when he made those inappropriate comments about the grab him by the, and we'll leave it at that. And so he got canceled. He got fired from his job. And his crisis communications people told him, go hide for 3 or 4 years or something like that. And it was the wrong thing to do. I said, Billy, get up. You got to get up and you got to get back in the game and don't let people define you. That's what you got to do. And I appreciate that, by the way, because it was brutal. It was brutal.
Ambassador, when you were on the front lines of the civil rights movement, you were trying to ensure that we upheld our most sacred democratic ideals, which were being violated in the Jim Crow South. Our democracy became stronger as a consequence of the civil rights movement. And yet now, 60 years later, we see democracy eroding. How do you account for that? Why is that happening?
I think maybe people get scared. Life is not easy, and it's very easy to adopt a myth that gives you a sense of security in that you are associated with this group of people around this myth, it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, but they make you feel comfortable. Now, that's not what we have been taught to stand for in this country. And I think this is the end here, it says here, kind of.
No, I think we're okay for a while.
Okay, well, but what I was thinking was,
The end of what?
they had down here
Final
final thoughts. And I keep coming back to Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Because it's almost 60 years since he was assassinated. But I don't think a day passes when we don't hear something he said quoted by somebody else. But the thing that keeps coming back to me in this conversation is his quote, "Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, for behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own."
Well said.
Tip, you talked about one of our founding documents a moment ago. How can the creative community rally to bolster our democracy in this perilous moment?
I think what we do is we continue to distribute truth and light and inspiration, by way of creativity. And we just can't waver, we can't waver no matter, it's a sacrifice, it's a sacrifice to stand on moral integrity, whatever your truth is. I think that if you are courageous enough to speak it, if you know that it's true in your heart and you believe in it, then whatever the consequences are, then they're just par for the course. It just has to happen. I don't think you shouldn't derail yourself or as you say, hide for 3 or 4 years. I think, man, you just continue to live life because, all things happen as they should. And you never know. Next year, people will look back and say, "Oh, so he was right after all." And a lie gets around the world before the truth could put his shoes on. You know what I'm saying? So I just try to focus on doing what I feel is right. Nobody has a magic wand or a crystal ball to know the perfect things to do. We all deserve grace. We all require grace. Everyone deserves grace.
Preach, brother.
And I think when you counsel, like the idea, the thought of counseling someone to me is discarding people and throwing them away from society for moments of indiscretion, which we've all had. We've all had moments of indiscretion. And I think that when those moments of indiscretion happen, it's what I consider a teachable moment. There's a lesson there. There's a time to sit down, have a conversation, come to a moment of clarity, a moment of understanding to move forward, with better practices. But you can't even welcome that opportunity that moment if you just decide to discard people and throw them away immediately.
It's true. Yeah, well put. Anthony, I want to go back to your former boss, Donald Trump. The integrity was once the bedrock of the presidency. You look back at the legend about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and says, "I cannot tell a lie, I chopped down the cherry tree." You look at maybe our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, and his nickname was Honest Abe. We measured a president by truth, by his integrity. Donald Trump, according to the Washington Post, for whom you have written opinions, told a whopping 30,000 lies during the course of his presidency. To what extent is Donald Trump...
They must have missed about 10,000, by the way. They probably weren't counting 100 of them.
But to what extent is Donald Trump responsible for the attack on truth in our country?
Well, I think he's heard it. I think he's also created space for intolerance. And I think that He'll say that he hasn't, but he has, and you can just see the people that are attracted to him. But we're running out of time, and I want to cede my time to Ambassador Young because we want to get some final thoughts from him. But I would just say this. If you have integrity, and you're talking about canceling, if you have integrity, there will always be opportunity for you. You're going to hear from Michael Milken shortly. He's a dear friend of mine. When I got fired, he was one of the first phone calls into my cell phone. What can I do? How can I help you? And I think when you speak with integrity and you act with integrity, there will always be opportunity for you. Don't forget that, but I want to cede my time.
Well, I hear you. I think we've got a little more time. I think we have 35 minutes, and we have a little more time than that's indicated. I want to do a lightning round before we give the ambassador the final round and ask you all, and I'll start with you, Anthony, in this very fraught time, in this very challenging but consequential time, where we face so many challenges, including the fact that truth is no longer what it once was. What gives you the greatest hope? Anthony?
Look out here. This is it, man. I mean, come on. This is it. This is a society of aspirational people. And this is a society of dreamers and risk takers. And we were told in the 1830s by Tom Malthus that we were going to starve, that the population was going up, and we weren't going to be able to grow the food fast enough. And we innovated. We got more people dying from obesity now than starvation. We were told in the 1980s that we were going to run out of oil. It was peak oil theory. And then we developed fracking and GPS. We were told that the healthcare was going to be 30% of the GDP when it was at 20. It's gone to 14 because of biotechnology and innovation. You can never bet against the people that are in this room. And you know that the people in this room want to do what's right. We just have to force our leaders to stop thinking left and right. How about right or wrong? And it's important for us to do that. But no, I mean, I am a byproduct of this country. I mean, I would have been picking grapes somewhere in Italy, maybe if I was lucky. And this country, and you know it for yourselves, this country has given you that opportunity and that ability to seek an aspiration. And as long as we have that, we're going to be just fine. That's my opinion. Go ahead, Tip.
This is the theme of this conference is the case for optimism. What makes you optimistic? What gives you hope?
I believe in purpose. I believe in purpose. I believe in change. And I know that, change doesn't happen without some level of sacrifice and consequence. So wherever there's sacrifice and consequence, change is imminent. And evolution cannot continue without change. And if you look historically, in all parts of society, in all of the world, historically, I don't care how many empires, how many periods you look at, anyone who fought against change lost. So I believe in purpose, I believe in change, and all things will continue to evolve, and that is the way humanity and society has been able to exist and become so phenomenal. The way, even with all of the perilous things that we're talking about right now. Yeah, these are things that are, they're inconveniences. That you had a tough time. I had a tough time. He had a hell of a tough time. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think so.
Better now.
No, really. I think I have had the most wonderful life on earth.
Amen.
You know what?
You have, but Mr. Ambassador, let me ask you, we have a couple of minutes here, and I want to ask you two questions, including the one that I just asked Anthony and Tip, but I'm going to save that. Before we get to that, I'm going to ask you, going back to something that Tip said, you got to find grace. You have seen in your life as an activist the very worst in human nature, and yet you found grace. Not only did you find, you are Ambassador Young because you were the ambassador to the United Nations, but before that, when you were waging the civil rights movement, you were the ambassador. You were the one who went out to the community and negotiated settlements between white racists and the black community. How did you find grace in those moments?
Well, I was born into it, see? I mean, it's part of the black heritage that we tend not to be judgmental. We know that all men sin and fall short of the glory of God, and women do too. And, you judge not that you be not judged. And I just thank God that I have been taught by my grandmother that grace, and I was glad to hear you use that word, rappers talking about grace. I mean, that's high stuff, seriously. And mercy. I mean, people set you up to get killed.
Yeah.
So, and you have profited in the career that they tried to kill you out of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what life is, a struggle of good against evil, and good always prevails eventually. See? And, well, let me go ahead and get into this because I had to leave the United Nations, and I'm going to tell you how it happened. Because Harry Belafonte invited me over to his house to meet with the former Prime Minister of Israel. And as a result of that 4-hour conversation, he was trying to get me to bring the Palestinians to the table, because he said, we're getting old and we know Arafat and them, and we would do better settling this issue if we settle it in our lifetime. And we think that President Carter is the kind of spirit that could get both sides together and we could put this thing to rest. I think if we'd had another term, that would have happened. But then after that, Moshe Dayan had me to lunch on Fifth Avenue in a restaurant where we were all being seen by everybody that passed by. And everybody knew who I was and they knew who he was. What are we doing talking together? So, and then I go to the State Department and tell them what's going on. And it was made them uneasy. And it was my time, according to the Constitution and the laws of the United Nations, it was my turn in August to be president of the Security Council. And we rotate alphabetically, and nothing ever happened in August. And so I was trying to keep nothing from happening in August. So the Palestinians decided they wanted to come to the table with the Israelis. See? Now, what we're talking about now and what we're seeing on television every day has been struggling to find reality in my time since Ralph Bunche in 1948. And Ralph Bunche won the Nobel Peace Prize for trying to work this out. This is nothing new. It didn't happen on October 7th. It's been happening all of our lifetime, and we haven't been able to rise to the occasion and make it make sense. But everybody knows, and it's not being anti-Muslim or anti-Semitic, it's being for life and for the preservation of humanity and for peace on earth and goodwill toward all men, women, and right now it's especially children. That's what hurts us, to see children dying every day. And there ought to be another way.
Mr. Mayor, we're about to get canceled not by culture, but by Operation Hope. Will you please join me in thanking Anthony Scaramucci, Tip Harris, and the legendary
Oh, man, I really enjoyed
Andrew
it.
Young.
Hope I could-